Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Brenton Lengel of Insurrection with Brenton Lengel, which formerly was carried on the Starcom radio network before I put the show on hold because I started to get more writing work. And, with the election coming around the corner, I've decided to start YouTubing again and, continuing to involve myself in politics where I probably don't belong. But today I'm really excited because I am speaking with Michael Gentilucci. Is that how you say your name, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Say again?
I go by Mike.
Mike? Okay. Terrific. Yeah. And Mike, you and I got to know each other through actually the communist versus libertarian debate group. And you were like the token liberal in the group that everybody shat on. But you were always a good sport about it.
I shat on everybody else.
Yeah. Or I'm sure that's what happened. but no, you know what? I got to commend you on that because, to go into a group of a bunch of leftists and a bunch of like right-wing libertarians and to be kind of the Democrat in the group, that's intimidating and that takes guts. And it's one of the things that I've liked about you. Since we started talking, and also I can tell you're a really smart guy. I'm gonna get some guff from the rest of the group for saying that, but no, I think you're a very smart guy.
No, I think that generally is I think that's why everybody kind of tolerates me.
Yeah,
and also because I make good arguments generally, and that group in particular was started by a lot of people on the left, and I really am on the left.
mm-hmm.
I would consider myself progressive. And I like to make fun of libertarians because I think they're idiots.
A lot of them are, and that comes from me being a former libertarian. Now, I don't consider myself to be on the left. I not because I don't tend to agree with most things on the left, but because I like to keep my brain free of team bias. It's one of the things that I noticed at Occupy. When you feel besieged by the media and you've got all these people around you and suddenly there's a lot of pressure to kind of maintain the party line, which is something like I will never do if I feel like it's not justified. But anyway, let's kind of talk. Why don't you give the audience a little bit of your background? Because I know you've written a number of fairly successful political articles. And, and then we'll just see where the conversation takes us.
Yeah. I don't know how successful they are really, but I would say that, I am a Democrat, but I'm a Democrat because I live in Pennsylvania and it's a close primary state, which means I have two options. And, I tried to convince Liz Warren that she should run as a Republican. She didn't get back to me on that idea. I thought it was brilliant, by the way. But, I wasn't registered to a party when I lived in California. I typically vote more with the Democrats. But, I'm the same way as you, where, I started a little group as a joke called the Independent Progressive Conservative Radical Centrist People's Caucus. And it was really meant to kind of defy that whole tribalism thing that is, so prevalent. And that's part of the problem that we have. In any case, my background, if this is a little shaky, it's because my tablet is sitting on a hamper and my cat is curious about everything and just decided to go inside it. So
the cat is the best anarchist, as Ernest Hemingway famously said.
Yeah, so I used to run a magazine called Slur, which was an arts and culture review that masquerades as a baseball publication. It's been
that's cool.
For a while. Yeah. I have a background in poetry, and so me and one of my friends got together and we started this kind of lit and arts review that sort of morphed into this thing where we did, I wrote a fair amount of political satire and also did reviews of books, movies, and stuff like that. We got a bunch of people to do like funny baseball commentary. And then we, solicited a lot of art, photography, poetry, fiction, experimental.
That's really freaking cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it got a fair amount of traction for what it was. And I've actually had several people be like, "You need to bring this back," and I would if I had time to do it.
Yeah.
But life has gotten in the way, and hopefully, sooner or later it will come back. But yeah, so I did that. I did. My friends and I started a thing called the Concerned Citizens Coalition. I was explaining to you earlier, is a coalition of citizens who are concerned with the concerns of the citizenry and have coalesced into a coalition to concern themselves with the concerns of the citizens are concerned with.
Yeah. Now we should specify that the Concerned Citizens thing, this was something that you and your friends had gotten together to want to do when there was that rally to restore sanity / keep fear alive in Washington, D.C.
Right. Well, we were in LA at the time, and we did some videos around it, and Occupy was going on, so we visited Occupy a few times. We had all these stickers. I got some great reactions because, we did a lot of clever buttons and pins that we were handing out, and some of them were support mustaches. But some of them, there was one that said, I can't remember what it said. It said, support segregation in big letters, and then underneath it in small letters it said, of facts, opinions, and made up nonsense. And so
you got me.
A lot of great responses for that, because people had that same look that you just had when they first read it, because they couldn't see what it said underneath, and then they leaned in and started laughing, and it was great.
Well, it's interesting. I had Jangles the Science Lad on my channel recently because he was talking about his debate with Milo, and we went into talking about the nature of comedy and how comedy works. And one of the reasons that one of the theories that he had was benign trespass theory or something. I don't remember exactly how he put it, but basically the idea that comedy springs from people realizing simultaneously that a norm has been violated, which creates tension, but then that the actual violation of that norm doesn't matter, which then diffuses the tension. And so, you said on my podcast, support segregation, and and I knew you were going to be going in that direction. So I was just like, okay, what's happening here? What's he going to say? And then when you said the last, I was like, okay, yeah, that's a perfect example of how humor works and why humor is edgy, and also why, if you violate the norm, but it's not benign, it's not funny. It's just being an asshole.
Right. And it's also why humor really is one of the most effective weapons, I think, to disarm people and to really actually create a conversation where, in a lot of cases, otherwise you might not be able to get through to people. I think it has that effect if you can use it in that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, art in general has that ability, but humor in particular, when it comes to very charged issues that bring up a lot of anxiety, humor, I think, is uniquely situated for that, and for that type of rhetoric, which is why bad humor has lately been weaponized by the right, and also why the right tends to not be funny. Yeah. Now, that's an interesting kind of thing to talk about right there, because like you, I started out as an artist, and I'm still an artist. I'm primarily an artist. I do the political stuff kind of on the side because that's just another aspect of my personality. Years ago in New York, the first play I ever had produced was a short play, or I'm sorry, this was the second play I had produced, was a short play called Trolling 101. And this was a short play that I had written about being a dick on the internet. And and this was in 2010, and it sort of lionized the character of the troll. And his kind of battle with a an overly helicopter moderator on a forum. And, there was cross-dressing and people getting smashed with bang hammers. And at one point, the troll is screaming, "Fire my laser," and throwing porno mags onto the stage because he's, to approximate spamming a forum with something. So, I'm doing this thing, and the whole play was really funny and people loved it. And it was edgy, but it was edgy in a good way. And like, I can't produce that play anymore because the freaking right wing went and ruined trolling. Like,
there have been a few instances of, I don't know if you're familiar with the Final American Revolution.
No, what's that?
Kind of like when I got my start. So Adam Kokesh, right?
Yeah.
So he was planning to hold an event where he was going to have a peaceful armed rebellion against the federal government.
Oh my God. Damn it, Adam.
So, and the event page had like open comments. So, tens of thousands of people descended on this page and just trolled the shit out of it. It was hilarious. And I was like a frequent person on there. I ended up with the moniker. I was the DJ / grill master at FEMA Camp 23 for the Saturday night barbecue orgies. Nice. And we had a gun-free cupcake zone. And there are moments where things bubble up where I feel like there's a mass of really people that are less engaged in that sort of thing, but see this thing happening and it's just so hilarious that they can't resist. And the last time that happened was the snacktivist thing with the Oregon Reserve. There were there was a group dedicated to that, and the whole running gag about like sending them dildos and stuff.
That was pretty funny. Stop sending us dildos. I remember that one. That particularly irritated me because, like, I'm an AT 2000 miler. Like, I'm also a professional wilderness guide, and like, I am connected with the wilderness and with I'm very dedicated to like national parks and wilderness preserves and stuff. And like, there's this very pretentious kind of, you see it oftentimes in people who think that they would be great woodsmen, but really what they want to do is they want to play with a gun and drink beer and, not really do anything else. So I was annoyed that it was a wildlife preserve that they had invaded. And unfortunately, like, the whole thing that went very badly, largely, for their own fault. But like, if you remember that tarp guy got himself killed while they were running around, and I just rained on the parade there. I apologize.
I mean, I don't even really know what to say about those people. Although the Eamon Bundy has been in the news recently
because he came out in favor of Black Lives Matter,
which is really interesting, right? Because and I think the through line there is that they're very like libertarian in terms of like land possession and stuff. So they ended up allying themselves with a lot of white supremacists during the whole, even before the wildlife reserve thing, because there's definitely white supremacists that are kind of that bent as well.
Well, that whole state, like Portland, and I think to a lesser extent Seattle, or not Seattle, Washington State and Portland, after the Civil War, after the loss, a lot of people who were just so racist, like they didn't even want them as slaves anymore. They just didn't want to be around people of color, went up and tried to build their like white ethno state up in that area. So you have these very liberal elements in Portland and Washington State. It's those are coastal states, but then you also have these entrenched bigots who've been there arguably since the beginning.
Right. Yeah. And I just thought it was really interesting because, it's like, it just seemed to me, I was like, well, it's not like I don't believe him when he says that stuff. I really feel like he probably does hold that position. It's just that the white supremacy thing didn't bother them when it was
Hmm.
about land rights and well, not even exactly land rights. They were illegally grazing cattle on a protected habitat of an endangered species,
Yeah,
and they were not paying federal government the grazing rights because
they just
that's
decided they shouldn't.
right. So and it was a whole weird thing, and I've gotten into arguments with people who were like, oh, but the case got tossed out in court. It was like, yeah, because the government did shit wrong too, unfortunately, but that doesn't make them in the right. Like
Yeah.
there's you know, so I don't know.
Well, I remember there was when that whole thing, the first thing was going on, not the second, but the first Bundy Ranch fiasco. There were a bunch of people that I was heavily involved in sort of this battle between the ANCAPs and the ANCOMs, the anarcho-capitalists and the anarcho-communists and classical anarchists. And the what was it? Some ANCAPs showed up at the Bundy Ranch and declared it Ancapistan and put out some like pictures of themselves like with like flags by them. And I saw it on Still Laughing at Anarcho-Capitalism where like there's a guy standing there and it looks like he's wet himself with a big gulp and like a tent behind him and a freaking like ANCAP black and yellow flag, and it's like, Ancapistan, why aren't you here? And they'd put the picture of Fry where he's like kind of side-eyeing something from Futurama, and it's like, is that a trick question?
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of also part of where I got my start. I don't know how many of those groups that you're in, but I somehow stumbled into the ANCAP versus minarchism debate group,
Oh,
which is
geez.
where I met a lot of the people that
Mm-hmm.
started the communist versus libertarian thing, and why they invited me was because I like to shit on ANCAPs and libertarians,
Which
more
is
broad.
always fun. I have quite a few videos shitting on ANCAPs and libertarians in my thing.
And and voluntarism, and I've every once in a while there'll be a post and I'll go through the spiel about how it's basically a half-baked philosophy that doesn't really make any sense, and then the whole private property thing, and how are you going to govern. And that's why I think the people on the left kind of, like I said, tolerate me a little bit, and why I also kind of really liked the way you framed some of this stuff in a way that I hadn't quite heard before, in regards to the difference between government and the state. Because I always said to ANCAPs, like, at least anarchists on the left understand that government is really just a tool to make collective decisions that impact the community, and you can't not have that, right?
Yeah, you definitely
So,
can't. Like, people will always do that. Governance is something that we do. Like, I've got issues with probably every government on earth and every government that has existed and probably every government that will exist, just because nothing's perfect, you know. But I think it is very important to realize that, like, anarcho-communists and other forms of classical anarchists, we are very much opposed to the state primarily, as in the military and the police, as they are realized in their current forms. And you can see this both in anarchist criticism and also like just the history of anarchist movements and what they have done. Um, and anarcho-capitalists are almost the opposite, where what they really want is they seem to, I don't know if they put the blocks together in their head, but essentially what they want is they want a state with all democratic mechanisms removed. So the government then becomes an informal oligarchy of powerful business owners who have a 100% tyranny over all of their private property, are somehow magically not at war with one another, and they seem to want to switch the military and the police to like an a la carte competing a la carte defense,
Right.
which I hate to tell them this, but that already happened.
Right. That's what I tell them too.
Yeah, like that's policing. That's how policing in the North started. In the South, the first official police departments were rolled into police departments out of slave patrols, and which is one of the reasons why, for instance, like the Ferguson police still use police dogs to intimidate and torture exclusively black prisoners, because they got that from the freaking slave patrols that founded them. In the North, like the police, they were mercenaries. They were private police that shopkeepers and prominent people in the community paid on an a la carte basis, and they competed with each other, to like protect everything. And what they found was that this was a horribly corrupt system, first off, where the police would get in cahoots with the criminals and arrange for the criminals to steal things so that the police could get the property back, and then give a kickback to the criminal.
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned a lot from you about that too, watching some of your podcasts. I was familiar with, I think the Pinkertons are probably the most well-known example of that. And there was a mine strike, I think, and
the Battle of Blair Mountain is what you're referring to, where they like brought in freaking air support.
I think that, I mean, that right there should show you that it's, that any sort of policing structure really has to be for the public benefit and run through some sort of public system. It can't be, and that's the problem they seem to have, and libertarians in a lot of cases in general, is that they think the free market can solve everything. And, and just like government, the free market's a tool. It's good for some things. I'm not against the free market,
I am, but it's mainly out of spite.
But for things like, say, for things like TVs or whatever it is. But in terms of providing basic things that we all collectively decide everybody should have access to, it's not good. It doesn't make sense for roads. It doesn't make sense for a healthcare system. I mean, you can kind of combine elements of things. You can still have doctors competing with each other, but the insurance part of it in particular is just moving money around to lower the risk pool. And what's happening right now with our system is that we're extracting wealth, right, from the system for people that are basically just moving numbers around, and it's, and people are dying because of it, which is there's no way to run a system, and everybody else has figured that out. And that's
but we can't figure it out because in America, America's always been about big business. A great example that I would also point to is like roads. Just the fact that the idea of jaywalking was literally created by the car industry because cars were running down and killing people. And instead of doing something about that and figuring it out, they just instead put the blame on the people who were being killed and said they're jaywalkers and turned it into a crime, as opposed to looking at the thing and saying, maybe we need a better way to move cars around crowded cities.
Right. I think I vaguely also remember that the history of that term is basically a racist slur.
I wouldn't be surprised. Better, it's quick. Someone find out if it's a racial slur and then come back here and clip me out saying it and cancel me.
Right. I have 2 pages of notes here, and we haven't touched on anything.
Oh, this you prepared for this. That's adorable. So what do you want to touch on? What do we want to talk about?
It wasn't that big of a thing.
No, you put some work in. So what's in your notes?
Well, so I watched the video that you had about today.
The Trevor Noah video,
the Johnson thing, and I don't even know who he is or whatever, but in general, I would definitely side with people who are, it seemed like this guy was giving a criticism of what Trevor Noah is doing. Now, I don't know how much of Trevor Noah's video you actually have to show to do that. I would probably argue that at least you should be able to show some of it.
Yeah.
So like I can't speak to the particulars about that. But I think that that I can kind of see the two sides, and I don't know where Trevor Noah in particular comes down on this, or if it's his company or whatever.
Yeah. So if you look this is for people who haven't seen that video. It's called lefty comedians are not your friends, or leftist comedians are not your friends, and it's kind of going into those who use leftist and progressive movements as an audience to push their own brand, but when push comes to shove, they're not there to support the people. They don't actually want to see the stuff happen. And the thing with Trevor Noah, and honestly, putting myself into his place, I might want that clip suppressed, because and the clip is you can see it on Vimeo. It was a clip of his stand up, and he was talking about how tear gas wasn't good enough to use on people. People just enjoyed the tear gas, and you had to use real live rounds on these striking miners and kill them because they were shooting back and stuff. And I'm sorry, that's not a decent premise for a comedy routine. We were just talking about that. Comedy is you violate a norm, but you violate it in a benign way. And essentially what he was doing was violating the norm of maybe the state shouldn't murder people, and being like, no, it's good. It's good that the state murders people. That's what I took from it.
I watched it and I was somewhat amused by it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he's a good comedian.
Even if I didn't agree with it, I can see where you could get into the criticism of it kind of normalizing this sort of behavior by the cops and making it okay, by turning it into a joke. I can definitely see where there's an argument to be made there. I'm not 100% sure that that's really what he was going for. Maybe that was the result in at least some people's perspective. So I'm not trying to judge one way or another, but definitely in terms of free speech, you should be able to critique it, and people need to know what it is that is
being critiqued. Yeah.
Right. So, but more broadly, a couple things that I came away from your video. I'm someone who really tries not to be cynical. So, you say, oh, these people aren't your friends. Well, I don't know who, you went into that whole thing about the one Occupy protester that got arrested.
Yeah, Cecily McMillan.
And then, and you were going back and forth in the Daily Show about it, and they turned it into a joke and totally flipped it and didn't say anything about what was going on.
Yeah, they pretty much just took the prosecution's line and decided that was fact.
Right. And I don't know if that was Jon Stewart himself or one of his writers. Clearly, somebody should have known that they were being disingenuous, which is not cool. But, at the same time, like I said, I'll give Jon Stewart the benefit of the doubt that it was probably one of his writers. But I'm also going to say that, at the same time, so I don't know what they would have done with it comedy-wise, because as somebody who writes comedy, I can't think of in any way how that's funny. You could mention at the end of the show, like he does sometimes in a more serious tone, potentially. But the other thing that I would say is that Jon Stewart's done a lot for, in particular, first responders and healthcare.
If I recall, he did do that.
That's his cause, right? And I'm not going to bag on him too much for not getting involved in somebody else's cause, although I don't think he should do things that are counterproductive to it, which is kind of what seems to have happened here.
Yeah. I'll agree with you, and I think that's fair. I think the issue is that Jon Stewart, we were hoping, it's kind of the same thing with the John Oliver issue, where he did the really great expose because a lot of people didn't know about it. They didn't know that, for instance, people's medical debt is sold for pennies on the dollar to people. But, and then people try to collect the whole amount or as much of it as they can from people who literally can't pay it. And it's criminal that, debt and distressed debt is treated as a commodity in this society that we have. But what was awful about that was essentially this comes down to the problem of a radical solution or a charitable band-aid on an issue. And it's not so much that charity isn't something you want to engage in. Charity is very important, but more, if you eschew actual solutions to a serious problem in favor of charity, and say that, we do this charity, so let's not look any further into it, problem solved, when charity by its very nature cannot actually solve these problems. You run into a really big issue.
Yeah, that's the one of the basic problems with libertarians all the time is that, they think that government's not the solution and charity is, and part of that is kind of a self-fulfilling thing where the right in particular has basically done everything they can for the last 40 years to make sure that government doesn't work.
Indeed.
Which, and then you're looking at it like, well, so how do you solve this if the free market can't solve it? And then, they're like charity, and they're like, look how great America is in terms of our charitable giving. Well, yeah, but it's still not a solution to anything.
No, it's really not, because the problem, really the root of the problem is that there are people in a position to give that much charity, because we have extracted from the system a ridiculous amount of wealth and allowed it to be bogarted and monopolized by just a handful of people who really under no circumstances could possibly deserve what they have. I mean, I think, do you and I agree on that, or do you disagree?
Yeah, no, I agree on that. And it's interesting. I mean, I started my career, I worked for a charity for 7 years.
Oh, me too.
And, I see a lot of, and I've also written for a philanthropic trade publication and was responsible for basically tracking these mega donors, what they're giving to and all that. And a lot of them do really great stuff, but it's never enough. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation isn't they're doing a good job at combating malaria and other things, and props to them, and I give them plenty of credit, but they work with governments and they recognize the problem. And you listen to a lot of these billionaires, they're kind of on the same page as us in terms of yeah, we make too much money. I support raising the capital gains tax, raising the top marginal rates, things like that. And then we can have a debate about how far you should go with that. But it's it's kind of ironic that probably 80% of them at least are basically on the same page as we are in terms of saying that they have too much money and that these problems are problems that need to be solved through government mainly. So, and then the thing that I was going to mention about John Oliver is I don't know if anybody wrote him or if he,
just came up with that on his own. I mean, it may have been that it was the tactic was so well established, and there was even a lot in the news about it when we did it. There were accountants and stuff in Forbes saying, oh, well, this could actually cause problems because if you forgive someone's debt, it might make their taxes go up and all this other stuff. But so I'd be surprised if he didn't know about it.
Yeah, I don't know whether he knew about it or not. All I was going to say is after the fact, I would have written him and been like, hey, did you know we were also doing this? It would be really cool if you gave us a shout out, even if it's not on the show,
something on Twitter or whatever. That probably would, I don't know if anyone did that, but that's probably a more constructive way to approach the issue than being like, hey, you ripped us off, and coming in hot and aggressive. I'll give you that, until the end of time.
Right. So, yeah. And I think that's where a lot of, what I try to do, and part of the reason I sort of got involved in some of these debate groups is to try and figure out constructive ways to talk about a lot of this stuff, and why I also tend to use comedy a little bit, because I'm not case just shitting on people. Like, I actually have ideas too, of things I would like to see happen that I think are going to be helpful. And that's why I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the Never Biden thing.
Yeah. Let's definitely do that. But hang on, before you did, there was something I wanted to say, and let me see if I can remember where it was. What were we just talking about before we move on to the Never Biden?
Oliver and
Sean Oliver and being nice to people. You know what? It'll come to me halfway through the next thing, and I'll interrupt you. Okay, so let's talk about the Never Biden thing.
So this was the whole reason that we were having this conversation, and you and I have talked about having a conversation for probably close to a month now, but we sort of settled on this. I saw it on the Modern Day Debates. I was like, they're doing this, Biden versus Never Biden thing. It was Destiny and Kim Iverson. Destiny was on the, Kim was Never Biden, and Destiny was.
Yeah, and Destiny's a liberal, so he was on the pro Biden.
Okay, so
he was on the Biden bus.
So, before I get into all of that, and I'm often accused of being a liberal, and I tell people that I'm basically liberal on two things, which is giving people the benefit of the doubt and application of sauce.
Oh, that reminds me. Now, this was the thing I wanted to talk about. So you mentioned that, you're not as cynical as me, and good job. Most people should not be as cynical as me. I actually took, are you familiar with like the F score that you can take? It was a test developed by like Adorno to see how much of a fascist your personality might be. Like,
I haven't taken that one. I'm not really.
You should take it and try it. It's online. It's free, and you can just take it and see the dark side within you and see how much of a fascist you might be. And like the way it's scored is like if you score overall below 2, you're in no way a fascist, and then like you get up above 4. Like up in the 5 or 6 range, you're like a prime recruitment. Like you're not necessarily a Nazi, but you're someone who, if the Nazis came to power, you'd be like fine with it. But anyway, I took this F score test and I scored well below 2. Like I scored like a 1.7, and I'm like, okay, yeah. And then I looked down my scores, and it was like almost nothing in every category except on cynicism and destructivism. I had a 4. And I'm like, oh, well, I just learned something about myself.
So, I don't know. I'm always skeptical of those tests, especially when they're online.
And it was even phrased in like a funny kind of way, so maybe it wasn't even the real test.
I don't know. In terms of the bias that the test itself has, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'd be interested to see too. I would take it, and you
just see how that goes. Maybe I'll post it in the discussion group.
Much stock in it, right? Yeah. But in any case, so my whole thing about the whole upcoming election is that I think there are legitimate reasons why you could vote for third party, and I think we've talked about this before. Mm-hmm. Particularly if you're strategically trying to get funding for a third party or trying to get them ballot access. Like, I get that. Like I said at the beginning, I live in Pennsylvania. I don't have that luxury.
Yeah. Whereas I lived in New York in 2016 and definitely had that luxury, which is why I voted Libertarian in 2016.
Right. Which is weird to me. If I was going to pick a third party, I would vote Green Party or Working Family.
Yeah. No. You know why I voted Libertarian? Because Gary Johnson was the closest to hitting that 6%. I freaking hated Gary Johnson, but I was like, I hate the two-party system so much, I will vote for him just to try. And then he didn't get it. And I was just like, okay, if he's not going to get it now, they're never going to get it. And I pretty much lost all faith in third parties.
I think I get it. And I want to get into a couple things here, but
yeah,
the first thing I will say is that, Bill Maher's gone on this thing about how Trump's not going to leave the White House, right? And I'm not too worried about that, because I think when push comes to shove, like, he's not going to like the optics of being dragged out kicking and screaming.
Yeah. And he's alienated the military.
Right. But the bigger problem that I see right now is that he is already starting to question the integrity of the election. Last time he claimed that 5 million people in California voted illegally, and he saying that mail-in ballots are prone to fraud, which they're not. We should be very clear about that and push back on it every chance we can get. But the issue that I see is that if we don't send a very decisive message, then he's going to go on about it either way. But the more decisive it is, the less water it's going to hold with his supporters. And
Makes sense.
There are going to be people that commit acts of violence because they think the election was stolen. That's what I'm worried about.
That's a really good point, honestly. Do you have any data to back that up, actually?
I mean, nothing other than anecdotal stuff. Like, you remember the Caesar Sayoc guy? I don't know how
that guy, yeah.
The only reason that a dozen or more pipe bombs didn't detonate, in the hands of media figures and politicians and stuff was mainly because he was bad at building bombs. But, I feel like just because of the number of people and the number of supporters and the craziness of some of them and the way that he riles them up, the potential is definitely there. I'm not saying it's going to happen. For sure. I'm not saying I have no idea how bad it might be or not, but it's something that I worry about.
Absolutely. Now, there's something I wanted to point out really quickly, just because you brought up Caesar Sayoc. So this was somewhat underreported because it happened just before the 2016 election, and really kind of came to light in between 2015 and especially October 2016. And it was that Wells Fargo had been stealing people's homes, literally stealing them, as in deciding that these people owed them money. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, forging paperwork and foreclosing on hundreds of thousands of homes across the country. And they did get caught, but the Obama administration did nothing to help those people. And, there was no bailout. There was nothing to freeze the evictions. And that was going right into the election. And to tell you the truth, I haven't heard this floated by too many people, but with as close as the election was between Hillary and Trump in 2016, a number of people, that could have been one of the major events that swayed the election in Trump's favor, because you lose your freaking home and Obama doesn't take care of you. Yeah. Now, the other thing that I will point out is Caesar Sayoc was one of the people that Wells Fargo foreclosed on his home. Now, I don't know if he was one that it was stolen from him. He may have just actually owed them money. But, you can see how a failure to take care of the citizenry and to make sure that, they are protected from corporate predation leads directly to, Trumpian fascism.
Yeah. I definitely think there's a line. And that was one of Kim's argument, was that basically Trump is a symptom. And I think we all pretty much agree on that. It's just, what's your plan to fix the root of the problem? And that's where she kind of fell apart and didn't really have an answer, as far as I was concerned. The other thing that I'll point out real quick in terms of, this sort of goes to that. The other reason that you would vote for Biden is that I think one of the things we probably both agree on is that we should get rid of the Electoral College. It's anti-democratic, small democratic.
And doesn't do the thing that it's supposed to do.
Right. So the best way to do that, God forbid he wins another term. If he wins another term but loses the popular vote by 8 or 10 million votes, that's going to push states that are already kind of on that borderline of maybe we want to go to a popular vote instead over the edge, because for Trump in those places it's 30% or something. So that's kind of another sort of factor. But in any case,
Yeah. Now I can also add, by the way, into this to those of you out there who are listening, who are kind of on the line of never Biden or Trump and Biden are exactly the same. What I'm going to say to you, or if you don't care about anything that Michael has said here, what I'm going to recommend is this: vote for Biden anyway. Why? Because it will hurt Trump's feelings. Even if he wins, like it will hurt his feelings. Every single vote that goes to Joe Biden is going to be like a freaking knife in his black heart. And, I got to say, it's pure spite. But yes, I hate that man and his mutant family just that much.
And I totally agree with you on that point, too. That was sort of one of my original arguments as well. Like, it's going to hurt him. It's going to destroy any sort of mandate that he has if he happens to win. And I don't think he's going to.
I don't think so either.
Like I said, it is one of those things where if it did happen and you can point to a discrepancy between the Electoral College and the popular vote, that's a good motivation for a lot of people who might not otherwise care to say, hey, maybe we should re-examine this and think about changing it. And I think, like I said, that's kind of where one of the places where Kim fell apart on her arguments, because Destiny got into her basic argument for that part of it was like, well, if more people just voted for a third party, the third party would win. And I'm
sure.
Like, that's not a strategy.
No, it's not.
and the other problem with that, she brought up Teddy Roosevelt, and I was like, and the founding, she brought up the founding. She's like, well, there were 3 or 4 political parties. And then she brought up Teddy Roosevelt. And I'm like, you missed the punchline there. Teddy Roosevelt lost that election in 1912. And he was arguably the ultimate spoiler. And we ended up with Woodrow Wilson and not a second Taft term because of Teddy Roosevelt. And in terms of the founding, right, that was sort of before parties really coalesced and everybody figured out what was going on. But part of my whole thing is that if you don't address the fundamental issues with the system that are making it a 2-party system, then you're never going to get out of that. Say by some miracle, Joe Jorgensen wins or whoever wins, right? If you don't have a plan within 10, 15, 20 years, what's going to happen is the parties are going to realign and one of the 2 major parties is going to end up decimated, and people are going to move to that new party, and it's still going to be a 2-party system, and you're still going to be in a situation where 30% or whatever of the people in this country feel like they have no representation because neither of the parties really captures where they're at.
Yeah, which would be me. I feel like I have no government representation. Though, to a certain extent, you can at least annoy these people into doing what you want to do, what you want them to do, I found. It's funny, actually, because I was managing a nonprofit telefundraising thing for a college at one point. And this was a number of years ago. And what had happened was that, like, while I was managing it, there was that whole issue with net neutrality. And so I called up my local Democrat, which turned out to be Chuck Schumer. And I reached, like an intern in his office, and I'm like, hey, I'd really like to talk with Chuck Schumer. I'm very concerned about this bill. Would you be up to meet with me or to meet with some activists who know a little bit more about the internet? And because this was that one bill they were doing that was SOPA and PIPA. And I'm like, would you be up to meet with us? And the guy was like so freaking condescending. He's like, sir, are you aware that Mr. Schumer is a co-signer on that bill or a co-sponsor of the bill? And I'm like, no, but I would still like that. And I'm like, can I leave a message for him? And he's like, yes, you can leave a message. And so he's like, so he goes and I give him my message, and I'm angry, and I hang up the phone and I look at my staff, and I just realize I've got this room full of college students with access to their own phones and phone numbers. And I said, who wants an extra 15 minutes of break? All you got to do is call Senator Chuck Schumer and request a meeting with him to talk about SOPA and PIPA. And they went down the line. 1, 2, 3, 4. After 5, the intern on the other end was about to cry and was like, "Yes, we'll meet. I swear to God."
Right, and calling is definitely the best way to get their attention.
Yeah.
I've sent emails before, but
Emails are easy to ignore.
On the phone, yeah, and they say this themselves. They say if you really want to get through and make your voice heard, that you should really call them. In any case, so
especially because they're old people usually, and they don't like all this newfangled email and streaming.
Answer the phones are like interns. Like you said, they're probably like fresh out of college, or if you happen to get somebody senior, it's probably somebody around our age. It depends. And I've called like regional offices too. That's sometimes a trick that you can use when your congressman. Don't call their DC office, call their office in your district, because you're probably more likely to actually get a human being on the phone.
Absolutely. I should also add, by the way, if you're having problems, a lot of the time calling your local congressperson or your state senator, like even if it's not even totally problems related to the government. In New York, I had a problem with my infant son's health insurance. And I contacted the state attorney general and my local assemblyman, and they like jumped over themselves to help me, because they actually know, like, if you contact them directly, they actually know that if you're a constituent and they do something great for you, you're going to be voting for them for the rest of their time. And so a lot of these places, even Republican or Democrat, will fall over themselves to help you out.
Yeah. And telling all your friends too, right?
Like, yeah. That person. Well, it's the same thing. So like Vermin Supreme, great example here. Now, Vermin Supreme is not my local city councilor, but Vermin Supreme personally helped me. When I was protesting the Democratic National Convention in 2012, we were stopped and kettled by a bunch of police officers, and they had us like at this intersection, and things were getting pretty tense. It was hot. People were angry, and
everyone free pony.
Yeah. Vermin Supreme showed up, and I actually heard someone go, "Vermin Supreme's here. Now it's a protest." And he started, doing his thing and tossing glitter around and talking to the cops. And suddenly people started laughing and people started smiling, and the whole situation was diffused, and the cops eventually let us continue to march. Now, that could have devolved into a very, very ugly situation where a bunch of people got hurt. But because Vermin Supreme was there to bring a better energy to the area, like, it's still one of my fondest like street protesting memories. And so like when the chance to possibly vote for Vermin Supreme came up, even though I knew he had no chance in hell of winning, I was like, man, I think I might actually vote for Vermin Supreme if he gets the nomination, just because he had personally helped me and I wanted to help him again.
And who doesn't want a free pony?
Yeah, I know. And mandatory tooth cleaning.
I mean, yeah, I've seen worse platforms. Particularly.
Yeah. So we're kind of running down to the end. Is there, you have anything else on your list that you wanted to talk about?
There's a whole nother page of things here that I could go into about,
well, how about this? How about you pick one, and then you and me will stream together again in like a week or so.
Right. So I just wanted to like run down that whole debate. I mean, the one thing that I was sort of a little bit disappointed about was that Destiny kind of spent a lot of time really going on the defensive and kind of contradicting. I'm trying to, not coming up with the right word at the moment, but he was kind of.
He was attacking her arguments rather than making a positive case for Biden.
Right. And it wasn't even, it's not even necessarily a positive case for Biden necessarily, as it is a distinction between the two parties, like you were saying, because what I would have done in that situation, they talked a lot about foreign policy, and I think she was wrong on a lot of it, because I think Trump, we talked about this a little bit, like you said, where he's been right, it's been by accident, because his foreign policy, his sort of central organizing thesis of his foreign policy is, how does this benefit me? And I can't overstate how dangerous that is, right? And you saw it with what he tried to do in Ukraine. You saw it with the the Kurds and, basically greenlighting letting Turkey,
letting one ally attack the other ally because they hate each other, like when all he had to do was keep the troops there so that couldn't happen.
Right. So, I think that, and then the Iran policy, like, we would still be in the Paris Climate Accord and at least trying to move forward on environmental issues, and Iran wouldn't be going after a nuclear weapon, which was actually one of the things that she kind of agreed with. But you have to consider the reason that he did those things was because Obama did them. Yeah. And they were therefore bad. Like that's as far as it goes. And it's crazy to have a foreign policy that's essentially based on, I don't like this other guy, and also how does this benefit me? I mean, the latest thing in the news is about how he tried to steer the British Open to his golf club in Scotland. You didn't hear about that? Or are you
I did not hear about that. I'm not surprised, but Jesus Christ, dude.
He asked the British ambassador to bring it up with whoever the counterpart is in Britain, if they could, do anything to steer the British Open to Turnberry. And it's like, you've got to be kidding, right? Like this is what our tax dollars are paying for, right?
So and how petty and stupid. I mean, really, like out of all the important things that the president could be talking about with the freaking English is, hey, can we get this thing in my golf course resort? Screw off.
How obvious is it to any, and like the assistant ambassador guy, like the ambassador who's a political appointee asked like the career diplomat guy, what should I do? And the career diplomat guy, of course, was like, this is unethical and probably illegal, and you shouldn't do it. And then Trump asked again, and he ended up doing it anyway, and now it's a thing. But it's like, how dumb do you have to be? Like, obviously you're going to get caught, and obviously this is like, it's such a dumb reason to like, put your political career in jeopardy over this, whether you're the president or the ambassador or whoever. Like, Trump just thinks there's going to be no consequences for any of this.
Well, because he's rich, and unfortunately in the United States, there's no consequences for rich men.
Well, that's another issue. But and then the other thing that I would point out, like in terms of differences between the two, like she really focused on foreign policy and it kind of prevented them from getting anywhere else. But like if you're a dreamer, right, or you're somebody that's got hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills, or a sick kid with cancer, or a kid who got killed by somebody that shot up the school,
or a kid who's been separated from his family at the border,
right? Like, you can't tell me that there's not a difference between what the Democrats are saying that they're going to try and do and what the Republicans are saying they're going to try and do. And this is where I try to not be cynical, because a lot of people are like, well, they never get anything done that they say they're going to do. Then you have to go back and look at the system, which is designed basically to give conservatives an advantage, particularly in the Senate. And with the filibuster and just the way the Senate's designed in general, where you have 40 million people in California are represented by 2 senators, and then you can add up like 23 states or something, and some of those are Democratic states, but the majority of them are Republican states.
That has the same population. Now, the filibuster, I would be more in favor of the filibuster if they actually had to filibuster. Yeah. I mean, like at least then you give us something fun to watch, and it's a feat of watching you stand up and speak. Right. But like a lot of people don't know that, but all they have to do is say, I filibuster.
Yeah. Well, and it's become a thing where it's basically like 40 of them get together, and again, there's no political consequence for this because they just say, I filibuster, and it's even just the threat of doing it has become enough to not get anything through the Senate. And Mitch McConnell used that as a weapon to basically govern from the minority and represent like 40% of the people. And it really pisses me off when people say democracy doesn't work, because that's not democracy. That's the minority. Like,
now, I will say, I think you're being a bit too cynical there when you said 40% of the people, because, I've said this before, really, if we went with the results of the popular vote with the election in 2016, the overwhelming winner of the 2016 election is no one. Like 25% of registered voters voted for Hillary, and something like 23% voted for Trump, and over 50% didn't vote.
And
And
that's
like,
cynicism, right?
say what?
That's part of the cynicism. That's part of it's because a lot of people are cynical and don't think that anybody represents them. But if you look at, I mean, it is fun to make that argument, but it's not really, I mean, what are you going to do? Not have a president or
yes, let's not do that. Let's get rid of the presidency completely. In fact, I would say that if we got rid of we can still have, like, because people like to elect like a mascot, who goes and like opens bridges and clips things and kisses babies. We should have that, but it should be like a purely ceremonial position. And I would like to see everything run by everybody below the presidency.
Well, yeah, and I've advocated for things like, I would be fine with the parliamentary system where, you vote based on proportion, and the majority party ends up picking who the prime minister is, or you have to form a coalition government type thing. And that tends to give more people a feeling like they actually have a say, because, we could set it up in a way where if it wasn't necessarily bound by geography, that, any particular group could run for a seat in the legislature, and if you get enough percentage of the vote, then you get a seat. Like if we had 100 seats that were allocated proportionally and the libertarians got 5%, they would get 5 seats in government. And then you'd have, 10 million people or whatever. I don't think it's that many, but, they would really feel like they have someone that's representing them. So, I've said things like that. I've said things like, I wouldn't be opposed to having some of the more important cabinet positions be democratically elected. Secretary of Defense, Health and Human Services, Education, Yeah,
I'd agree with that. I think that would definitely be a change up. But yeah, I do think we should elect a special guy to just like run around and like. I think it was Chapo Trap House that said when it was looking like Bernie Sanders was going to win, they were feeling bad for Joe Biden because he was doing so poorly at that point. And they're like, though, I can't help but like him a little bit. What if we just built a set and told him he was the president?
Well, that was the whole joke around Trump, too, because he didn't really want to be president. I mean, he was only running because it was going to help him build his brand. And the best thing that ever could have happened to him was to lose.
Yeah.
That if not the Republican nomination, then definitely the presidency itself. Because I don't think he ever seriously.
I think his point was, I think he was planning to lose and launch Trump News and push the Trump brand. I think that was why he brought Bannon on, because Bannon was the Breitbart guy.
Right. And he also kind of also wanted to be like the mascot king, whatever, and if we just kind of created a position for him, would let everybody else run it, then maybe he would stop fucking everything up.
Ironically, that might have been the best possible position for, like, he might have actually been a good special guy in that. Because the one thing that I will say that Trump is very good at doing is like being a cheerleader for like the system.
And if he didn't also have to divide the country
and be racist and horrid,
right, then he could just cheerlead for everybody.
Yeah, he cheerlead for the economy. It'll be great. You're gonna love it, And that would have been terrific. And let him go and drive the tanks and drive the truck. He's a freaking 4-year-old.
We need to make him a gold-plated tank.
Oh God. I can't decide if I like that or if that thought is just breaking my brain. Well, dude, this has been incredible. I should definitely get you back on the show again, because this actually turned out even better than I thought it would. You're very personable, and this is the first time we've talked like eye to eye. So I think you're better on video than you necessarily are in text format.
Well, I mean, the thing about the internet is it's really easy to come off like an asshole.
Mm-hmm. Very
So,
much. Because, well, you don't see the other person's like reaction, so you don't feel bad. They're just an abstraction to you.
yeah,
Um,
a
all
lot
right.
of
So
misunderstandings and things like that. And I think that's part of why our politics has become so polarized too.
I think so. You know, there's a lot of issues with tribalism. I don't even call it tribalism anymore because unfortunately, one that has bad interactions for like actual tribes and doesn't have anything to do. It's really sectarianism. But like also, the Republicans kind of stole that. Like for years, I was like, I'd be like, tribalism is a hell of a drug. And then like the Republicans start complaining about tribalism. I'm like, oh, God damn it. And it was the same thing that happened to me when I was sitting there for years telling ANCAPs, you're not anarchists, you're classical liberals. You're a radical form of classical liberal. Just call yourself that. And then the frickin' Charles Koch is like, well, I'm a classical liberal. And PragerU is like, we're classical liberals. And Stefan Molyneux is like, I'm a classical liberal. And suddenly all these people are like, I'm a classical liberal. And I'm like, God damn it, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the other thing, what we could talk about next time potentially, because this has been something that I've been going on for a long time, is basically how conservatives have co-opted American values and try to pretend like these are exclusively conservative when that's not true at all.
Simply
And that's
not the case.
And part of the thing that bothers me so much is that, the left tends to let the right frame the debate in that way and doesn't push back on it and say, wait a minute, no, like you're not allowed to do that. Because like when we talk about government, right, people in a lot of these groups, they'll be like, oh, I like small government. And somehow small government has become a good thing. And I don't understand it because I'm not a size queen.
Okay, we're ending on that. You want to plug your pluggables?
No, I mean, well, right now I've got a couple things up on I'm a concerned citizen.org, but that's really all I'm doing. I haven't really put a whole lot out there recently. So there's a Concerned Citizens Coalition Facebook page that gets, some posting sometimes when I find something to be concerned about, or one of my friends do. But, for the most part, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out like what I'm doing in terms of.
Absolutely. Well, I understand that, and I know what it's like to be in that space. So keep doing that, and if you find yourself pushing something, you can come on the program and we'll talk about it. Great to talk to you, Mike. And for those of you who are watching, I'm Brenton Lengel. Please like and subscribe. I am trying to hit 1,000 subs by the end of this month, and I am only like 130, 125 away. So you guys could be the one to push me over that line, and that would be great. And if I get it, I'm going to be doing another poetry reading. Sorry, what did you say, Mike?
I do those from time to time, but no, I haven't done one in years. I was just going to say, I don't think I'm subscribed, so you've got at least one more now.
At least one more. Okay, thank you for not subscribing to my YouTube. Thank you for finally doing it. I just had to bring you on. So maybe I'll just bring 130 more people onto the channel. All right, I will catch you later, and we're out, and I will argue with you on Facebook very soon, Mike.